The battle for Theta Prime was going badly. Captain Jake Morrison crouched behind a broken wall as plasma fire scorched the air above his head. The Colonial Defense Force had expected a simple patrol mission, but they walked into a full-scale ambush by hegemony forces. Half his squad was dead, and the other half was scattered across the burning city. Jake checked his rifle and counted his remaining power cells. 3 shots left, maybe 4 if he was lucky. The enemy had superior numbers and better weapons. Standard military doctrine said retreat. Every tactical manual in the galaxy agreed. But Jake had never been good at following rules. Through the smoke and chaos, he saw something that made his blood freeze. Emperor Zex-High of the Valyrian Empire was pinned down behind a crashed transport, surrounded by dead Imperial guards. The tall, elegant alien leader looked nothing like the propaganda hollers. His silver skin was stained with blue blood, and his ceremonial robes were torn. The most powerful being in the galaxy was about to die. Jake's commanding officer was screaming. Orders to fall back through the cum system. Every other human soldier was already retreating toward the evacuation zone. The smart thing to do was run. The logical thing was to save himself. Jake turned off his comm and started running toward the Emperor instead. The hegemony soldiers were closing in on the Emperor's position. They moved with the mechanical precision of their species, following standard attack patterns that had worked for thousands of years. Jake watched them advance and started to see the pattern. They were good soldiers, but they were predictable. They always moved the same way, always took the same positions, always attacked from the same angles. Jake reached into his pack and pulled out his last 3 grenades. He had been saving them for an emergency. This seemed like a good time to use them. He threw the first grenade not at the enemy soldiers, but at a fuel depot 2 blocks away. The explosion lit up the sky and sent debris flying in all directions. The hegemony forces turned to face this new threat, exactly as Jake had hoped. While they were distracted, Jake sprinted across the open ground. Plasma bolts sizzled past his head, and one burned through his shoulder armor. He ignored the pain and kept running. The Emperor looked up in shock as this crazy human soldier dove into the crater beside him. "Your Majesty," Jake said between gasps, "we need to move, now." The Emperor stared at him with those large, golden eyes. "You should have retreated with your forces, human. This is madness." "Maybe," Jake replied, checking his weapon, "but I'm still here and you're still alive. That's got to count for something." The hegemony soldiers were regrouping, moving back toward their original target. Jake studied their movement patterns again. They were good, but they were still predictable. He threw his second grenade at a support beam, holding up a damaged building. The structure collapsed and blocked the main approach route, forcing the enemy to take a longer path around. "How did you know they would come from that direction?" the Emperor asked. Jake shrugged. "They always do. Your people think in straight lines, so do mine, usually. But sometimes you have to think sideways." The Emperor's personal guard had been the finest warriors in the galaxy. Krek soldiers with their natural armor plating, Mentari warriors with their telepathic abilities, synth fighters with their cybernetic enhancements. They had all died following proper military procedures. This single human was keeping him alive by ignoring every rule in the book. Jake used his final grenade to create a smokescreen, and then did something that made the Emperor's blood run cold. He stood up and walked directly toward the enemy position, firing his rifle as he moved. The hegemony soldiers had been expecting the Emperor to try to escape. They were not prepared for a frontal assault by one soldier. Jake moved through their formation like a whirlwind, using their own confusion against them. When his rifle ran out of power, he grabbed a fallen weapon. When that failed, he picked up a piece of debris and used it as a club. He fought with a wild intensity, that no alien species could understand or predict. The Emperor watched in fascination as Jake cleared a path through the enemy forces. The human was not stronger than the hegemony soldiers. He was not faster or better armed, but he was unpredictable, and that made him dangerous. "This way," Jake called out, gesturing for the Emperor to follow. They ran through the burning streets, while Jake's comrades provided covering fire from the evacuation zone. The Emperor's rescue ship was waiting at the spaceport, but the route was blocked by more enemy troops. Jake looked at the situation and made another decision that defied logic. Instead of trying to fight through the blockade, he led the Emperor into the city's sewer system. They crawled through tunnels filled with waste and toxic fumes, moving beneath the enemy forces. The Emperor had never experienced anything so undignified in his 3,000-year life. "Why are you doing this?" the Emperor asked as they emerged from a maintenance tunnel near the spaceport. Jake helped the ancient ruler to his feet and checked for pursuit. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because someone has to. Because maybe if I save you, this war will end sooner and fewer people will die." The Emperor studied this strange human warrior. Jake Morrison was young by galactic standards, barely 30 years old. His species had only been in space for 2 centuries. He had no special abilities, no advanced technology, no supernatural powers. But he had something that the Emperor had never encountered in all his long life. He had the ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. They reached the Emperor's ship just as the hegemony forces discovered their escape route. Jake pushed the Emperor up the boarding ramp and turned to face the approaching enemies. He had no weapons left and no way to fight, but he stood his ground anyway, buying precious seconds for the ship to launch. The Emperor's ship lifted off just as Jake collapsed from his wounds. The medical bay worked frantically to save the human who had risked everything for a ruler he had never met. As Jake lay unconscious, the Emperor made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. When Jake woke up 3 days later, he found himself in the Imperial Palace on Valeria Prime. The Emperor was waiting beside his bed, along with several high-ranking officials who looked deeply uncomfortable. "Captain Morrison," the Emperor said formally, "I have a proposition for you." Jake struggled to sit up, his shoulders still wrapped in healing bandages. "What kind of proposition?" "I want you to become my personal guard. The position comes with the rank of Imperial Protector and command of my security forces." The alien officials began to protest immediately. A human had never held such a position. Jake's species was too young, too unpredictable, too dangerous. The Emperor raised a hand for silence. "This human saved my life when my best guards could not. He succeeded where superior technology and ancient training failed. I believe his people have something to teach us about survival." Jake looked around the room at the assembled aliens. They were all staring at him with a mixture of fear and fascination. He realized that his actions on Theta Prime had done more than save the Emperor's life. They had revealed something about humanity that the galaxy was not prepared to understand. "I accept," Jake said finally, "but I'll need some of my own people to help me." The Emperor smiled, showing teeth that glittered like diamonds. "Already arranged. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes and Dr. Kevin Walsh are being transported here as we speak." And so began the most unlikely partnership in galactic history. A human guard protecting an ancient emperor, changing the way an entire galaxy thought about warfare, survival, and the terrifying unpredictability of the human spirit. Jake Morrison stood in the Emperor's private chambers, watching the sunrise over Valeria Prime. 3 months had passed since his appointment as Imperial Protector, and he was still getting used to the marble halls and crystal towers of the palace. The view from the Emperor's balcony stretched across the capital city, where millions of beings from dozens of species went about their daily lives. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Emperor Zexhai said, joining Jake at the window. The ancient ruler moved, with the fluid grace of his people, his silver skin catching the morning light. Different from Earth, Jake replied. But yeah, it's beautiful, the Emperor smiled. Your people have an interesting way of appreciating beauty. Direct, simple. My advisors still don't understand why I chose you. Jake had heard the complaints. The Galactic Senate had spent weeks debating his appointment. Traditional Imperial Guards were chosen from species with natural advantages. The Kreks had armor-plated skin and incredible strength. The Mentari could read minds and predict enemy movements. The Synth Warriors had cybernetic enhancements that made them nearly unstoppable. Humans had none of these advantages. They were young, weak, and unpredictable. That was exactly why the Emperor had chosen Jake. Sir, came a voice from the doorway. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes entered the room, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. She had arrived from Earth 2 weeks ago to serve as Jake's intelligence liaison. We have a problem. Lisa's expression was grim as she activated a holographic display. Our sources in the hegemony have picked up chatter about something called Operation Shadow Strike. They're planning something big. Jake studied the intelligence reports. The hegemony had been quiet since the Battle of Theta Prime, but that didn't mean they had given up. If anything, they were probably planning something worse. What kind of operation? The Emperor asked. Unknown, Lisa replied. But they've been asking about the palace security protocols, guard rotations, sensor networks, emergency procedures. They're planning to come here. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. An attack on the Imperial Palace was an act of war. The hegemony had to be desperate to even consider it. Double the guard rotations, the Emperor ordered. Activate all defensive systems. No, Jake interrupted. Both the Emperor and Lisa turned to look at him. That's what they expect us to do. If we change our patterns now, we'll just be confirming that we know something is coming. What do you suggest? The Emperor asked. Jake walked to the holographic display and began studying the palace schematics. We keep everything normal. Same routines, same guard positions, same daily schedule. But we add something they won't expect. What's that? Lisa asked. Me. Dr. Kevin Walsh arrived that afternoon with a full psychological profile of every known hegemony operative. The middle-aged psychologist had been studying alien combat patterns for years, and his insights had already proven valuable. The hegemony prefers surgical strikes, Kevin explained as they gathered in the security briefing room. They don't do brute force attacks. Whatever they're planning, it'll be subtle and precise. Jake nodded. Any idea what kind of operative they might send? Kevin called up another holographic display. Based on the target and the intelligence gathering, probably a Shade Walker. Lisa cursed softly. Shade Walkers were the most feared assassins in the galaxy. They could phase through solid matter, making them nearly impossible to detect or stop. Most security systems were useless against them. How do you kill something that can walk through walls? Jake asked. You don't, Kevin replied. Every attempt to eliminate a Shade Walker has failed. They're considered unstoppable. Jake stared at the display showing a Shade Walker in action. The creature looked like a living shadow, shifting between solid and incorporeal states at will. It had killed 17 heads of state in the past century and had never been caught. There has to be a weakness, Jake said. Everything has a weakness. Not this, Lisa said. The Mentari can't read their minds because they don't have minds. As we understand them, the Kreks can't fight them because you can't hit something that isn't there. The Synth can't track them because they don't register on sensors. Jake continued studying the footage. The Shade Walker moved like smoke, flowing around obstacles and through barriers. But there was something else, something that nobody else had noticed. It has to become solid to kill, Jake said finally. What? Kevin asked. Look at the assassination footage. Every time it kills someone, it becomes solid for a split second. It has to, or it can't interact with the physical world. Lisa pulled up the files. You're right. But that's only for a fraction of a second. No one has reflexes that fast. Jake smiled grimly. Then we don't rely on reflexes. We rely on prediction. The attack came 3 days later during the Emperor's evening meal. Jake was standing his usual post near the dining hall when the palace. Sensors detected a minor energy fluctuation. Most guards would have dismissed it as background noise, but Jake had been watching for exactly this kind of subtle sign. He immediately activated his comm unit. Lisa, check the temporal displacement readings in Sector 7. Already on it, came Lisa's voice. There's definitely something moving through the palace, but I can't get a lock on it. Jake left his post and began moving through the palace. Corridors. He wasn't trying to track the Shade Walker directly. Instead, he was heading for the Emperor's location, plotting the most likely route an assassin would take. The Emperor was in his private study, reviewing diplomatic reports. The room was heavily shielded and guarded, but that wouldn't stop a Shade Walker. Jake entered the study and began rearranging the furniture. What are you doing? The Emperor asked. Changing the geometry, Jake replied, moving the Emperor's desk to a new position. If I can't predict where the assassin will be, I can predict where you'll be. The Emperor looked confused, but didn't interfere. Jake had earned his trust on Theta Prime, and that trust had only grown over the past 3 months. Jake positioned himself, not where the Emperor currently sat, but where he would be in 10 seconds if he continued reading at his current pace. The Shade Walker would materialize at the optimal striking position, which Jake had calculated based on the room's new layout. The attack came exactly as Jake had predicted. The Shade Walker materialized behind the Emperor's chair, its form shifting from shadow to solid matter. But the Emperor was no longer there. Jake's furniture rearrangement had changed the optimal attack position by 3 feet. The Shade Walker found itself face to face with Jake Morrison instead of the Emperor. For a split second, the creature seemed confused. It was accustomed to appearing behind unsuspecting targets, not in front of ready opponents. Jake didn't waste the opportunity. He lunged forward with a combat knife, striking at the exact moment. The Shade Walker was fully solid. The creature tried to phase out, but Jake had timed his attack perfectly. The blade caught the assassin in the chest, disrupting its ability to shift between states. The fight was brutal and brief. The Shade Walker was faster and stronger than Jake, but it was also confused and wounded. It had never faced an opponent. Who could predict its movements? Jake pressed his attack, using the confined space of the study to his advantage. The creature tried to phase through the wall, but Jake tackled it before it could complete the transition. They crashed through the Emperor's bookshelf, sending ancient texts flying. The Shade Walker slashed at Jake with claws that could cut through armor, but Jake rolled away and came up with a heavy crystal paperweight. Jake brought the paperweight down on the creature's head with all his strength. The Shade Walker collapsed, its form flickering between solid and shadow before finally going still. How? The Emperor asked, staring at the dead assassin. Jake wiped blood from his forehead and checked his wounds. I didn't try to track it. I tracked you instead. Then I positioned myself where it would have to be to make the kill. Within minutes, the study was filled with Imperial guards and security personnel. The Krex warriors stared at the dead Shade Walker in amazement. The Mentari telepaths were unusually quiet. The synth soldiers ran diagnostic scans that confirmed what they all knew, but couldn't understand. A human had killed the most feared assassin in the galaxy, using nothing but tactical thinking and precise timing. He hadn't needed special abilities. or advanced technology. He had simply outhawed his opponent. "This is impossible," muttered Thakmer, the Krex guard captain. "Shade walkers cannot be killed." "Apparently they can," Jake replied. "You just have to be in the right place at the right time." Dr. Walsh arrived and immediately began examining the body. "This is remarkable." The psychological profile suggested that shade walkers rely on their victims' predictable behavior. "You disrupted that pattern." "I changed the game," Jake said. "Instead of playing defense, I played offense. Instead of trying to stop the attack, I controlled where it would happen." The Emperor looked at Jake with new respect. "You didn't just save my life. You proved that the impossible is possible." Word of Jake's victory spread through the palace within hours. The alien guards who had dismissed him as a primitive human now looked at him with something approaching awe. He had done something that their superior technology and ancient training could not accomplish. But Jake knew that this was just the beginning. The hegemony would not give up after one failed assassination. They would try. Jake Morrison walked through the Imperial Palace gardens, his mind still processing the events of the past week. The assassination attempt had sent shockwaves through the galactic community, but not for the reasons he had expected. The death of the Shade Walker was certainly news, but what really disturbed the galaxy was how it had been accomplished. Dr. Kevin Walsh fell into step beside him, carrying a datapad filled with psychological profiles. "The alien military advisors are requesting meetings with you. They want to understand your methods." "My methods?" Jake asked. "I saw a problem and solved it." "That's exactly what terrifies them," Kevin replied. "Every other species in the galaxy has standardized approaches to combat. The Krex follow ancient honor codes. The Mentari use telepathic coordination. The Synth rely on programmed responses. But humans? We improvise." Jake stopped walking and turned to face the psychologist. "You're saying that's a bad thing?" "No, I'm saying it's unprecedented. In 3,000 years of galactic civilization, no species has ever successfully adapted their tactics in real time the way humans do. We're chaos theory in action." Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes approached from the communications center, her expression troubled. "We've got a problem. Intelligence is picking up unusual activity in the outer systems. The hegemony is mobilizing forces, but they're not following standard deployment patterns." Jake and Kevin followed Lisa to the security briefing room, where holographic displays showed ship movements throughout the galaxy. The hegemony fleet was indeed mobilizing, but their formations made no tactical sense. "They're spreading their forces thin," Jake observed. "That's not how you prepare for a major offensive." "Unless they're not preparing for a major offensive," Lisa said. "What if they're preparing for something else?" Kevin pulled up his psychological profiles of hegemony leadership. The hegemony operates on collective decision-making. Every major choice is debated by their ruling council until they reach consensus. It's slow, but it's thorough. "So what changed?" Jake asked. "You did," Kevin replied. "Your defeat of the Shade Walker has them questioning everything they thought they knew about combat. They're not just fighting the Empire anymore. They're fighting the idea that their methods might be obsolete." The door chimed and Emperor Zishai entered, accompanied by his senior advisors. The ancient ruler looked troubled, his silver skin darker than usual. "We have received disturbing intelligence from our agents in the hegemony," the Emperor said. "They are not just mobilizing their military. They are reaching out to other species, trying to build a coalition against the Empire." "What kind of coalition?" Jake asked. "Every species that fears human influence," the Emperor replied. "The Corthan Syndicate, the Nexus Collective, even some of our own member worlds. They're calling it the Alliance for Galactic Stability." Lisa activated a new display showing the political map of the galaxy. Red zones indicated systems that had already joined the Alliance. The pattern was disturbing. Many of the Empire's traditional allies were wavering. They're not just afraid of the hegemony, Jake realized. They're afraid of us. The Emperor nodded slowly. Your appointment as Imperial Protector has had consequences we did not anticipate. Other species see humans as a threat to the established order. Kevin pulled up his research files. I've been studying the psychological profiles of every major galactic species. The pattern is consistent. They all value predictability and stability. Their entire civilization is built on knowing what to expect from each other. And then we showed up, Jake said. Exactly. Humans represent everything that terrifies them. About the unknown. We're adaptable, unpredictable, and we don't follow the rules they've spent millennia establishing. Jake walked to the window and stared out at the alien city below. Beings from dozens of species moved through the streets in orderly patterns, each following the behavioral norms of their people. It was a civilization built on predictability. Show me the intelligence reports on the Alliance, Jake said. Lisa activated the display. The Alliance was more than just a military coalition. They were sharing technology, coordinating diplomatic efforts, and establishing new trade agreements. They were building something that could challenge the Empire's dominance. But what caught Jake's attention was something else. The Alliance military structure was based on the principle of combined arms. Each species would contribute their natural strengths to create an unstoppable force. Krek shock troops, Mentari telepathic coordinators, synth technical specialists, and hegemony strategic planners. They're trying to create the perfect military, Jake observed. Every species doing what they do best. And it might work, Kevin said, if they can coordinate their efforts properly. Jake studied the tactical projections. The Alliance had superior numbers and technology. Their combined fleet could match the Empire's forces. But there was something they didn't have. They're still thinking in straight lines, Jake said. Each species is contributing their strength, but they're not adapting. They're just doing what they've always done. But in larger numbers? The Emperor approached the display. What do you see that we do not? Jake pointed to the Alliance command structure. Look at how they're organizing. The hegemony provides overall strategy. The Kreks handle ground operations. The Mentari coordinate communications. The synth manage logistics. It's efficient, but it's rigid. And rigidity is weakness, Lisa said, understanding Jake's point. Exactly. They've created a military that's only as strong as its weakest link. If we can disrupt one component, the whole system falls apart. Kevin was already pulling up psychological profiles. The hegemony command structure relies on consensus. If their leadership becomes divided, they can't make quick decisions. The Krek's honor code prevents them from retreating, even when it's tactically sound, Lisa added. They'll fight to the death, rather than adapt their positions. The Mentari telepathic network requires constant mental contact, Jake continued. Disrupt that, and they lose their coordination advantage. And the synth are programmed for specific responses, Kevin finished. They excel at handling known situations, but struggle with unexpected variables. The Emperor was beginning to understand. You're suggesting we don't fight their strengths. We exploit their weaknesses. I'm suggesting we do what humans do best, Jake replied. We adapt. We improvise. We turn their own advantages against them. Over the following weeks, Jake worked with Lisa and Kevin to develop a new approach to galactic warfare. They studied every species in the Alliance, identifying behavioral patterns and tactical preferences. They mapped out decision-making processes and communication networks. But most importantly, they began training Imperial forces in human-style thinking. Jake established what he called chaos drills, where soldiers had to adapt to constantly changing scenarios. Lisa developed intelligence-gathering techniques based on human intuition rather than technological analysis. Kevin created psychological warfare tactics designed to exploit alien predictability. The results were remarkable. Imperial soldiers who had followed standard procedures for decades suddenly began thinking creatively. They started questioning orders, improvising solutions, and adapting their tactics in real time. "This is unprecedented," reported General Vextar, the Empire's military commander. "Our forces are becoming more effective, but they're also becoming more difficult to control." "That's the point," Jake replied. "An army that can't be controlled by its own commanders can't be predicted by the enemy either." The Emperor watched these developments with fascination. His own thinking was beginning to change as well. Instead of relying on ancient protocols and traditional approaches, he started making decisions based on human-style intuition and adaptability. "My advisors are concerned," the Emperor told Jake during one of their private meetings. "They say I'm becoming unpredictable." "Good," Jake replied. "Predictable rulers are easy to overthrow. Unpredictable ones are dangerous." The transformation wasn't limited to the military. Human influence was spreading throughout the Empire. Diplomatic corps began using unconventional negotiation tactics. Trade officials started adapting their agreements based on changing circumstances. Even the palace staff began thinking more flexibly. The galaxy was watching these changes with growing alarm. The Alliance propaganda machine worked overtime to paint humans as a corrupting influence on galactic civilization. They claimed that human unpredictability would lead to chaos and destruction. But Jake knew better. Humans weren't bringing chaos to the galaxy. They were bringing evolution. For too long, galactic civilization had been static, locked into patterns. That hadn't changed in millennia. Humans represented the possibility of growth and adaptation. The first test of this new approach came sooner than expected. The Alliance launched a probe attack on the border system of Xerion Prime, testing Imperial defenses and gathering intelligence. It was a standard military operation, executed with textbook precision. The Imperial response was anything but standard. Instead of reinforcing the system according to protocol, Jake convinced the Emperor to abandon it entirely. Imperial forces withdrew, leaving Xerion Prime apparently defenseless. The Alliance was confused. This wasn't how the Empire normally responded to attacks. They spent weeks analyzing the situation, trying to understand the tactical implications of the withdrawal. The war began not with a massive fleet engagement or a dramatic invasion, but with a simple communication broadcast. The Alliance for Galactic Stability announced their intention to restore order to the galaxy by removing the human contamination from the Imperial government. Within hours, Alliance forces were attacking Imperial installations across 17 star systems. Jake Morrison stood in the Imperial War Room, watching the holographic displays as red warning lights flickered across the galaxy. The Alliance had launched a coordinated assault that should have been devastating. Their forces outnumbered the Empire's by almost 3-1, and they had superior technology in most categories. "They're hitting us everywhere at once," reported General Vextar, his four arms manipulating multiple control interfaces simultaneously. Classic hammer and anvil strategy. "They're trying to overwhelm our defenses through sheer numbers." Emperor Zex High studied the tactical displays with calm intensity. "What do you recommend, General?" "Standard defensive protocols," Vextar replied. "Pull back to fortified positions, consolidate our forces, and make them pay for every system they take." "No," Jake said quietly. Everyone in the room turned to look at him. "That's exactly what they expect us to do. They've planned this entire offensive around our defensive capabilities. What do you suggest?" The Emperor asked. Jake walked to the main display and began highlighting systems. "We don't defend. We attack." "Attack where?" General Vextar asked. "They're hitting us on 17 fronts." "We attack where they're not," Jake replied. "Look at their deployment pattern." They've committed everything to this offensive. Their rear areas are practically undefended. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes pulled up intelligence reports. He's right. They've stripped garrison forces from their core worlds to support this operation. If we could get behind their lines, ... It's impossible, Vextar protested. We don't have the forces to break through their formations. We don't need to break through, Jake said. We need to go around. Dr. Kevin Walsh approached the display, his analysis of Alliance psychology finally proving useful. The Alliance leadership is expecting a conventional response. They've wargamed every possible Imperial defensive strategy, but they haven't prepared for an offensive one. Jake activated a new tactical overlay. We split our forces. Half retreat according to standard protocols, making the Alliance think their plan is working. The other half disappears. Disappears? Where? The Emperor asked. Into the spaces between systems. The empty regions that nobody monitors, because there's nothing there. We use those areas to move our forces behind Alliance lines. General Vextar was shaking his head. The logistics alone would be impossible. You can't supply a fleet in empty space. We don't need to supply a fleet, Jake replied. We need to supply raiders. Small, fast groups that can strike and disappear before the Alliance can respond. The Emperor was beginning to understand. You want to turn our military into guerrilla fighters. I want to turn our military into humans, Jake corrected. Adaptable, unpredictable, and willing to fight dirty when necessary. The transformation began immediately. Imperial forces across the galaxy received new orders that went against every principle of traditional warfare. Instead of forming up into standard battle groups, they broke into smaller units. Instead of defending fixed positions, they became mobile. Instead of following established supply lines, they learned to live off captured resources. Jake personally led the first raid, taking a small force to the Alliance communication hub at Nexus Station. The station was lightly defended because it was far from the front lines. The Alliance had never considered that anyone would attack such a remote target. The raid was swift and brutal. Jake's forces didn't try to capture the station or destroy it completely. Instead, they corrupted the communication networks, planted false information, and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Within hours, Alliance commanders across the galaxy were receiving conflicting orders and contradictory intelligence. This is not warfare, protested Admiral Korfmax of the Hegemony Fleet. This is chaos. Exactly, Jake replied when he heard the intercepted communication. And chaos is what we do best. The effects rippled through the Alliance command structure. Their carefully coordinated offensive began to fall apart as units lost contact with their commanders. The Hegemony leadership, accustomed to lengthy debates and consensus building, found themselves unable to adapt to the rapidly changing situation. Meanwhile, Lisa Hayes was conducting her own form of warfare. Her intelligence teams infiltrated Alliance communication networks, spreading rumors and misinformation. They convinced Krex units that their Hegemony allies were planning to abandon them. They told Mentari telepaths that their synth partners were plotting against them. The Alliance unity, built on mutual mistrust and fear of human influence, began to crack under the pressure of human psychological warfare. Dr. Walsh's contribution was more subtle but equally effective. He analyzed the behavioral patterns of Alliance commanders and predicted their responses to Imperial actions. This allowed Jake to stay one step ahead of enemy forces, always appearing where he was least expected. They're trying to outthink us, Walsh reported during a strategy meeting, but they're using their own logic to predict our actions. They can't comprehend that we're not thinking like them at all. The war's turning point came at the Battle of Zirian Prime. The Alliance had finally cornered a major Imperial fleet in the system, trapping them between two massive battle groups. It should have been a decisive victory. Jake arrived with his Raider forces just as the battle was about to begin. Instead of engaging the Alliance fleets directly, he did something that no military commander in galactic history had ever attempted. He attacked the star itself. Using modified mining equipment, Jake's raiders began bombarding the system's star with gravitational disruption devices. The star didn't explode or collapse, but its output became unstable. Solar flares erupted across the system, disrupting sensors and communication systems on both sides. "This is madness," Admiral Korfmax transmitted to his fleet. "No one fights a battle inside a solar storm." "Humans do," Jake replied over the open channel. "Welcome to human warfare." The Alliance forces, accustomed to precise coordination and technological superiority, found themselves blind and deaf in the electromagnetic chaos. Their advanced sensors couldn't penetrate the solar interference. Their telepathic networks were disrupted by the stellar radiation. But Jake had prepared for this. Imperial forces had been training for months to fight without their technology. They used visual signals, mechanical systems, and most importantly, human intuition to coordinate their attacks. The battle became a chaotic melee unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships collided in the darkness, weapons fired at shadows, and commanders made decisions based on instinct rather than information. It was everything that traditional galactic warfare was not, and the humans thrived in it. Imperial forces, trained in Jake's chaotic methods, adapted to the conditions faster than their enemies. They turned the solar storm into a weapon, using the electromagnetic pulses to mask their movements and confuse Alliance targeting systems. "How are they doing this?" demanded General Vekvar of the Krex forces. "We can't see anything. We can't coordinate. We can't even communicate properly." "They're not trying to," came the reply from a captured Imperial officer. "They're just fighting. Each ship, each squad, each individual soldier is making their own decisions. They don't need coordination because they don't need to think the same way." The Alliance forces, trained for precision and coordination, began to panic. Their entire military doctrine was based on working together as a unified whole. When that unity was broken, they didn't know how to function. Jake's raiders moved through the chaos like ghosts, striking at Alliance command ships and disappearing before they could be targeted. They didn't try to destroy the enemy fleets completely. Instead, they created more chaos, more confusion, more opportunities for Imperial forces to exploit. The battle lasted 18 hours. When the solar storm finally subsided, the Alliance fleet was in ruins. Not because they had been outfought, but because they had been outadapted. They had superior numbers, better technology, and more experienced commanders. But they couldn't match the human ability to thrive in chaos. "Impossible," Admiral Korfmax said as his flagship limped away from the battle. "We had them trapped. We had every advantage except one," Jake replied. "You tried to fight a human war using alien tactics. That never works." The victory at Zerion Prime broke the Alliance offensive. Their carefully planned strategy was in ruins, their forces were scattered, and their leadership was divided. The Hegemony Council fell into heated debates about how to respond to human tactics. The Krex generals demanded honor combat to settle the matter. The Mentari telepaths retreated into meditation, trying to understand the human mindset. The synth commanders requested new programming to handle unpredictable opponents, but Jake wasn't finished. While the Alliance was trying to regroup, he launched a series of raids that struck at the heart of their coalition. He didn't attack their military bases or industrial centers. Instead, he attacked their confidence. Imperial forces began appearing in impossible places, doing impossible things. 6 months after the war ended, Jake Morrison stood guard outside the Grand Assembly Hall on Valeria Prime. Inside, representatives from over 300 species were gathering for the first Galactic Peace Conference in 2 centuries. The hall buzzed with nervous energy as delegates who had been enemies just months ago now sat at the same table. Jake watched through the massive crystal windows as beings from across the galaxy filed into their seats. Krex warriors in ceremonial armor sat beside Mentari telepaths in flowing robes. Synth representatives with their glowing cybernetic implants took their places next to hegemony diplomats in traditional black uniforms. Nervous? Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes asked, joining Jake at his observation post. "Should I be?" Jake replied. "It's just a peace conference." Lisa smiled. It's the first time in galactic history that a human has been present at a major diplomatic gathering. Half the species in there have never even seen a human before. And the other half? Jake asked. They're terrified of us. Dr. Kevin Walsh approached with his ever-present datapad. The psychological profiles are fascinating. Every species is trying to predict how humans will behave in a diplomatic setting. They're all applying their own logical frameworks to human thinking. And failing? Jake asked. Completely. They keep expecting us to make demands, claim territory, or establish dominance. They don't understand that we're actually trying to help them. Jake nodded. The post-war period had been challenging in ways that the actual fighting had not. Victory in battle was simple compared to building trust in peace. The galaxy had seen what human warfare could accomplish, but they didn't yet understand what human diplomacy could achieve. "Sir," came a voice from the communication station. "Emperor Zex High is requesting your presence in the hall." Jake straightened his uniform and checked his sidearm. Even at a peace conference, he was still the Imperial Protector. The Emperor's safety was his responsibility. The Grand Assembly Hall was a marvel of galactic architecture. The ceiling stretched up into a crystalline dome that showed the stars beyond. Concentric circles of seats surrounded a central speaking platform where the Emperor stood, his silver skin gleaming in the soft light. Jake took his position behind the Emperor's chair, aware that every eye in the hall was on him. He had become more than just a guard. He was a symbol of human influence in the galaxy, and everyone knew it. "Honored delegates," the Emperor began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustics. "We gather today not as conquerors and conquered, but as partners in a new galactic order." A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. The concept of partnership was foreign to most galactic civilizations. They understood dominance hierarchies, trade agreements, and military alliances, but true partnership required trust and mutual respect. The recent war has shown us that the old ways of conducting galactic affairs are obsolete, the Emperor continued. We can no longer rely on predictable patterns and established procedures. The galaxy is changing, and we must change with it. Ambassador Korth Till of the former hegemony rose to speak. "Your Majesty, the hegemony accepts responsibility for the recent conflict. We acted out of fear and misunderstanding. But we must ask, what assurances can you give that human influence will not destabilize the galaxy?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jake could feel the tension in the room as hundreds of alien minds focused on the Emperor's response. "The assurance I can give," the Emperor said calmly, "is that human influence has already begun to stabilize the galaxy. Look around you. When was the last time so many species gathered peacefully to discuss their differences?" "Never," admitted Councillor Thekvar of the Krex Assembly. "But that does not mean we understand human intentions. Your guard defeated a Shade Walker using methods we cannot comprehend. Your forces won a war using tactics that defy logic. How can we trust what we do not understand?" Jake stepped forward, surprising everyone in the hall. Imperial protectors traditionally remained silent during diplomatic proceedings. But these were not traditional times. "May I address the assembly?" Jake asked. The Emperor nodded. The floor recognizes Imperial Protector Jake Morrison. Jake walked to the center of the platform, aware that he was making history. No human had ever addressed the galactic community directly. The silence was absolute. "Honored delegates," Jake began. "You ask how you can trust what you don't understand. The answer is simple. You learn to understand it." He gestured to the assembled crowd. "Every species in this hall has unique abilities that others don't possess. The Kreks have natural armor and incredible strength. The Mentari have telepathic powers. The Synth have cybernetic enhancements. But you all coexist because you understand each other's capabilities." "But human capabilities are different," protested Representative Veltar of the Mentari Collective. "Your abilities are not physical or technological. They are psychological. You think in ways that we cannot predict or control." "Exactly," Jake replied, "and that's not a weakness. It's a strength. For too long, this galaxy has been locked in. Patterns that haven't changed in thousands of years. Every species knows what to expect from every other species. War plans are drawn up centuries in advance because everyone's behavior is predictable." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But predictability is stagnation. A galaxy that never changes is a galaxy that never grows. Humans bring something new, the ability to adapt, to evolve, to find solutions that no one else has considered. But adaptation brings chaos," argued Chancellor Nex Rawl of the Synth Confederation. "Our civilizations are built on stability and order. Without predictable patterns, how can we plan for the future?" Jake smiled. "You don't plan for the future. You adapt to it. Planning assumes that tomorrow will be like yesterday. Adaptation prepares you for tomorrow to be completely different." Dr. Walsh had prepared him for this moment. The key to reaching alien minds was to speak in terms they could understand while introducing concepts they had never considered. "Let me give you an example," Jake continued. "The Shade Walker that tried to kill the Emperor was defeated not because I was stronger or faster, but because I didn't fight the way it expected. I adapted to the situation instead of following established protocols. And that terrifies us," admitted Ambassador Korthtal. "If humans can defeat our most feared assassins by thinking differently, what else can they do?" "They can help you solve problems you didn't know you had," Jake replied. "They can show you opportunities you never saw. They can teach you that strength comes not from following the same patterns, but from being ready to change those patterns when necessary." The Emperor stood and joined Jake on the platform. "This is what human influence truly means. Not the domination of one species over others, but the evolution of all species together. Humans have already begun teaching our military forces to think adaptively. The results have been remarkable. Our soldiers are more effective, more creative, and more capable than ever before," added General Vextar. "But more importantly, they're more alive. They're not just following orders. They're thinking, adapting, and growing." The transformation had spread far beyond the military. Imperial bureaucrats were learning to modify regulations based on changing circumstances. Diplomats were developing new negotiation techniques. Engineers were designing systems that could adapt to unexpected conditions. "This is all very interesting," said Prime Minister Yelka of the Nexus Collective. "But what does it mean for the rest of us? How do we benefit from human influence?" Jake looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of species. "You benefit by learning to think like humans. Not instead of thinking like yourselves, but in addition to it. You keep your strengths and add adaptability to them." "Impossible," protested Councillor Lekvar. "We cannot simply change the way we think. Our minds are not wired for uncertainty." "No," Jake agreed, "but they can be trained for it. We're not asking you to abandon your nature. We're asking you to expand it." Lisa Hayes stepped forward from her position near the wall. The Empire is prepared to offer training programs to any species that wants to learn adaptive thinking. We're not trying to make you into humans. We're trying to help you become better versions of yourselves. The offer sent another murmur through the hall. The idea of learning from humans was both appealing and terrifying to many species. What would be the cost of such training? Asked Ambassador Korthtel. Knowledge, Jake replied. We want to learn from you as much as you learn from us. Humans have adaptability, but you have capabilities we lack. Together, we can create something greater than any of us could achieve alone. The Emperor nodded. This is the new order one propose. Not human dominance, but human partnership. Not the replacement of your traditions, but their evolution. Not the end of galactic civilization, but its transformation. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Species after species rose to voice their concerns, their fears, and their hopes. But gradually, a consensus began to emerge. The galaxy had seen what human influence could accomplish. Now they wanted to understand how to use it constructively. Very well, announced Prime Minister Yelka. The Nexus Collective agrees to participate in these training programs. But we want assurances that our sovereignty will be respected. Agreed, the Emperor replied. Human influence will be offered,